The rain in Glasgow had a particular personality. It wasn't the dramatic, cathartic downpour of the tropics. It was a persistent, whispering mist that seeped into your bones and the very stone of the city's buildings. A constant, melancholic companion for Leo, whom the world called Messi. It was the backdrop to the most defining chapter of his life. It was on such a day, huddled under the inadequate awning of the University of Glasgow's Gilbert Scott building, that the trilogy of his existence was formed. He was trying to shield a textbook on sports physiology from the damp when a voice, bright and clear as a bell, cut through the drizzle. "You'll have more luck using that as a raft on the Kelvin than keeping it dry with that thing." He turned to see a girl with eyes the color of dark honey and a smile that seemed to generate its own heat, defiant against the gray. She was clutching a sketchbook to her chest. Beside her was a young man, all effortless grace and confident posture, who laughed, a sound that was warm and enveloping. "She's not wrong, mate. You're new, yeah. First year sports science. I'm Fernandez. This is Liza." That was it. No grand ceremony, no clap of thunder, just a simple introduction in the rain. Fernandez, with his easy charm and a talent for all painting that belied his rugged exterior, and Liza, a whirlwind of neuroscience and a fierce, protective loyalty, drew the quiet, focused Leo into their orbit. He was Messi, not just for his skill on the pitch, a low-grade professional contract with Partick Thistle already in his pocket, but for his quiet, almost shy brilliance in reading the geometry of a game. They were an unlikely trinity, the artist, the scientist, and the athlete. Their friendship didn't grow, it exploded into being, filling the cavernous lecture halls, the cozy, book-lined corners of the Hillhead Book Club, and the roaring, beer-soaked floors of the QMU with an undeniable energy. They were a single entity. "Where's the other two?" became a redundant question. They studied together, Liza explaining synaptic pathways to a fascinated Fernandez, while Leo diagrammed football tactics on napkins for them. They celebrated together. Fernandez's 20th birthday, a legendary, hazy affair in a rented flat near Kelvin Grove Park. They endured together. The three of them crammed into Leo's tiny student accommodation on Byers Road, sharing a single pizza and complaining about a notoriously difficult professor. It was during one of these countless, perfect moments that Leo felt the first tectonic shift. They were at the Botanic Gardens, lying on the grass in a rare pocket of sunlight. Liza was animatedly describing the psychology of crowd behavior at football matches, her hands carving shapes in the air. The sun caught the tiny, flying hairs that had escaped her ponytail, forming a golden halo. Fernandez was sketching her, his gaze intense and fond, and Leo, watching her, felt a sensation so profound and terrifying it stole his breath. It wasn't just admiration, it wasn't just friendship, it was a quiet, devastating avalanche of love. He said nothing. How could he? Their trio was a perfect, delicate ecosystem. To introduce such a variable was to risk total collapse. So, he buried it, letting it fuel the quiet intensity with which he cherished their time together. He became the guardian of their unity, the silent sentinel of their happiness. The first crack appeared, as these things often do, not with a shout, but with a glance. Leo started to notice the way Fernandez's eyes would linger on Liza a moment too long. He saw the protective, almost possessive way his hand would find the small of her back in a crowd. He heard the subtle shift in their late-night conversations, the intimacy that was beginning to exclude him, not out of malice, but by the natural gravity of a bond deepening into something else. The night it happened, the night the ecosystem irrevocably changed, was at a Cayley dance. The room in the Oran Moor was a riot of swirling kilts and flying limbs. Liza, flushed and radiant, was a natural. Fernandez, with his innate grace, was her perfect partner. Leo, less coordinated off the pitch, hung back, content to watch. He saw it all unfold in slow motion, during a slow waltz, as a traditional fiddle tune wept through the hall. Fernandez pulled Liza just a fraction closer. He whispered something in her ear. Her smile, already bright, softened into something private, something profound. She nodded, her forehead resting against his for a fleeting, eternal second. Leo felt the world tilt. He knew, with a certainty that was as cold as the Glasgow rain. He knew. The confirmation came later, outside in the cool night air. Fernandez found him leaning against the damp stone wall. "Leo," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Liza and it's happened. We're together." Leo looked at his friend, his brilliant, bold friend who had never been afraid to take what he wanted. He saw the hope and the fear in his eyes, the fear of breaking them. In that moment, Leo made his choice. The choice for the greater good of the three. He summoned a smile, a genuine one, fueled by his love for both of them, even as it felt like his own ribs were splintering in his chest. "It's about time," he said, clapping Fernandez on the shoulder. "I'm happy for you, for both of you." The relief on Fernandez's face was a painful reward. He pulled Leo into a fierce hug. "You're the best, mate, the absolute best." And so, the new dynamic was established. Leo, the third wheel, now with a formal title. He perfected the art of it. He knew when to make an excuse and leave them alone, when to include himself so they wouldn't feel guilty, when to be the buffer in their first, inevitable arguments. He was the keeper of their origin story, the living archive of what they were before they were they. He watched their love bloom. He was there when they moved in together into a tenement flat in the West End, helping them carry boxes and assemble IKEA furniture. He was the first person Fernandez called, voice cracking with emotion, when he sold his first major painting. He was the one Liza sought out, tears in her eyes, after a brutal fight, and he listened, offering neutral, loving counsel, secretly dying inside because the man who had hurt her was his brother in all but blood. He dated other people, nice, smart, funny women, but they were always silhouettes against the bright, burning sun of his love for Liza. Every touch, every conversation, was a comparison he knew they would lose. He was trapped in his own silent play, acting the part of the happy, supportive best friend. The pinnacle of his silent martyrdom came on a trip to Barcelona, a graduation gift they had saved for years for. They stood together, the three of them, in the colossal, hallowed camp of Camp Nou. For Leo, it was a pilgrimage. For Fernandez and Liza, it was a celebration of him. As they watched the players' real-life magicians weave their patterns on the pitch, Liza leaned her head on Fernandez's shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. Leo watched them, set against the backdrop of 99,000 roaring fans, and felt a loneliness so absolute it was deafening. They were a perfect picture, a diptych of love and companionship. He was the artist who had painted them into the frame but had left no room for himself. Later that night, in a small tapas bar in the Gothic Quarter, fueled by too much sangria and the emotional weight of the day, the facade almost cracked. "Do you ever think about it?" Liza asked, her head lolling comfortably against Fernandez's arm. "The three of us, how we just happened. It's like the universe knew." Fernandez smiled, kissing her hair. "The best thing to ever happen to me. Both of you." His gaze met Leo's over the rim of his glass. There was a question there, a flicker of the old, unspoken understanding. Leo held his gaze, his heart hammering against his sternum. "Tell them," a voice screamed inside him. "Tell them now. It's your last chance." He took a deep breath. "The universe is a funny thing," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "It gives you exactly what you need, even if it's not exactly what you want." He raised his glass. "To the universe, and to the two best people in mine." They clinked glasses, a perfect, resonant chime that felt like a nail in the coffin of his own desires. Back in Glasgow, life moved on. Graduation came and went. Leo's football career progressed steadily. Fernandez's art gained recognition. Liza embarked on her PhD. They still met every Sunday for a roast dinner, their tradition. But the balance was changing. Their conversations began to include more talk of the future, a future that increasingly had room for two, not three. The climax of his long, quiet agony arrived on a bitterly cold winter evening. He was supposed to meet them at their flat, but Fernandez had texted, asking him to come an hour early. "Need to talk, just us." When Leo arrived, the flat was warm, smelling of linseed oil and Liza's jasmine perfume. Fernandez looked serious. He poured two glasses of whiskey, the good stuff they saved for special occasions. "It's Liza," Fernandez said, without preamble. "I'm going to propose." The words hung in the air, solid and final as a tombstone. Leo felt the floor drop away. He took a slow sip of the whiskey, letting the peat smoke burn ground him. "That's massive," Leo managed, his voice a low rumble. "I know, and I know how it changes things. With us." Fernandez looked tormented. "Leo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be brutally honest. As my brother." Leo nodded, bracing himself for the question he had dreaded for years. "Do you love her? Did you? Was there ever?" Fernandez struggled, his hands gesturing helplessly. "Back in the beginning, before Liza and I, did you ever have feelings for her?" The silence in the room was absolute. This was his moment, his one, final chance to speak his truth, to unburden his soul of the weight it had carried for half a decade. He looked into the eyes of his best friend, the man who had shared his dreams, his fears, his life. He saw the ghost of that fear, the fear of having taken something that was never his to take, and he knew he could never confirm it. To do so would poison everything: their friendship, their memories, their future. It would make Fernandez's happiness feel like a theft, and Liza's love feel like a betrayal. It would shatter the beautiful, painful, perfect story of the three of them. He let a slow, easy smile spread across his face, one he had practiced in the mirror for moments like this. "Fernandez," he said, his tone light, almost dismissive. "No, never like that. She's my best friend. She's your soulmate." He reached out and squeezed Fernandez's shoulder. "I'm happy for you, truly. It's the way it was always meant to be." The relief that washed over Fernandez was so palpable it was like a physical force. He sagged, then pulled Leo into a bone-crushing hug. "Thank you, brother. You have no idea. I just had to be sure." "I'm sure," Leo whispered into his friend's shoulder, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He was the best man, of course. He stood at the altar in a small, ancient church in the Highlands, the same misty rain from their first meeting falling outside, and watched Liza Fernandez walk down the aisle, a vision of impossible beauty. Her eyes met his for a second as she passed, and she gave him a small, private smile, a smile that held the entirety of their shared history. In that moment, he felt a strange, piercing peace. This was his role. This was his love for her, not a passionate, consuming fire, but a steady, unwavering lighthouse, ensuring she reached her shore safely, even if it meant he remained forever in the deep, dark water. He gave his speech. It was funny, and heartfelt, and perfect. He spoke of Glasgow rain, of library all-nighters, of football pitches and art galleries. He spoke of a friendship that was the foundation of his life. He did not speak of silent sacrifices or a love that had been a constant, quiet hum beneath every word, every laugh, every shared glance for years. He raised his glass. "To Fernandez and Liza, my best friends. The calculus of our friendship was always simple. The two of you together equals everything right in my world." The room erupted in applause. Liza's eyes were shining with tears. Fernandez mouthed, "I love you, brother," from across the room. Later, as the party swirled around him, Leo slipped away. He stood on the terrace, looking out at the dark, looming shapes of the Highland hills. He felt a presence beside him. It was Liza. "That was the most beautiful speech I've ever heard," she said softly, looping her arm through his. "It was the truth," he replied, looking at her, memorizing her face in the moonlight, the silver light catching the delicate lace of her veil. She leaned her head on his shoulder, just as she had 1,000 times before. But this time, it was different. This time, it was a farewell. "You'll always be my Messi," she whispered, "my first friend in the rain. And you'll always be my Liza," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer fully decipher. "The one who made the rain stop." He held her for a moment longer, then gently extracted himself. "Your husband is looking for you." She smiled, a wife's smile now, and walked back into the light and the music. Leo turned back to the darkness, the cold Scottish air a familiar comfort. He had crossed every line for them, broken every boundary of his own heart. He had given them everything, and in doing so, he had preserved the one thing he valued above his own happiness, the perfect, untarnished story of the three of them. It was a story where only two people fell in love, and the third, the silent architect of their joy, loved them enough to let his own heart be the final, unspoken sacrifice. The rain began to fall again, a gentle, forgiving mist, washing over the silent man on the terrace, the keeper of the secrets, the guardian of a love that was, and would always be, his alone.